booster capacity. You couldn't build one that would not blow up. I got one here that shows you the fire they have. These are the lunar landers compared to each other. And of course, we left the bottom gold stage on the moon. So there's 6 of these up there sitting there waiting for you to go collect that golden sheath off there. I imagine that's worth some money, you know. And the top half is the only thing that got back out of moon orbit up to moon orbit. And then the crew evacuated that, got into the command module, and all 3 came back together in the same spacecraft. So this is one man and troops. They sent one man to explore the moon, which we thought was dangerous. At the time, we didn't know if somebody passes out, how do we get them back in and get them alive again? You'd have to revitalize the lander, pressurize it, all that kind of stuff. See? So that was the basic function of how do they think in terms of the people they have and the equipment they had around to build from. Okay, so keep going here. We were at that time in a race with the Russian Revolution. Khrushchev was running around banging his shoe on your desk. Remember that? You didn't know how to do nothing in the Russian world. So it was democracy versus communism, and Kennedy used that against us, or with us. You picked what you favored. But he made every effort to make sure that the Russians were beating us and they were humiliating us, and we needed money, and so we got our way. Okay? Now let's see. Now this is where it actually started in Morocco, where we had a rocket development, and this is the first early launches here. Down just to show you the launch control pads. This is the blockhouse, the way they looked at things. And here's Von Braun in the German military during World War II. He was a rocket honky. He loved rockets, and so he played with them. And Von Braun, of course, came to America along with many of the other captains of World War II and joined our workforce. And he became head of the NASA operations during the Apollo program. So he knew about rockets. This is our military were not adverse to building rockets. They just didn't build big ones because our technology was so great that it had a small hydrogen bomb. If our hydrogen bomb would have weighed 10 times more, I wouldn't have to be worried here. So we did. But they weighed it so light that there was no booster advantage delivered from the war effort. So we did everything with civilian dollars, you know. That's how that works, which is fine with me. I don't like war anyway. So these were all launched from, and of course, we had to launch from submarines. That was what the thing was during those days. And that's what we accomplished, okay? So this is what started our space program out. We inherited the military's ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missiles, who were designed to toss around a couple hundred pounds. That's all the bomb weighed in those days. And so we started that flying the manned space stuff. Okay? We get a man ready. Okay? The Russians, on the other hand, were about as primitive in the early days. They just wheeled the stuff across the field, set it up right, and began, you know. And this was their stupid thing. Khrushchev, I don't know, there were a lot of us around when Khrushchev was here, pounding on the table with his shoe. You remember this? In Congress, with his shoe, telling us nasty things in Russian.
Will grow up under copying this.
Yeah, roger that. Yeah. So he made everything he could out of the space technology the Russians had, because they had more than we did. And of course, Kennedy and Nixon was the guy that was mean enough to do a Khrushchev on Khrushchev. So we started poking back, and we got off to a bad start because Khrushchev was running around the world telling us we were secessionists and we didn't know how to do space. And Eisenhower was tired of war. He's just tired of war. He couldn't get into the space program for war purposes, etc. okay, you know. Let's see what, so Alan Shepard was our first astronaut. The Russians are orbiting a man, and then a woman right away, and then a dog and a cat, and we're just ballistic. We get out of the atmosphere and up, but we don't make it around quite around the Earth. And, but we call it our space Shepard, and Shepard was the first guy to ride that thing. Okay. So let's see where we go from here. Here is the history of getting to a spacecraft big enough to get to the moon, which is the top one on the Saturn V. But before that, we had 1 man, 2 man, and 3 man. Typical logical way you do things. You start with what you got, and you build up to what you want. Okay. And so it wasn't until we got a 3-man crew that we decided we had enough manpower to spend 3 days out, 3 days back, maybe 3.5 days on the surface of the moon. So we picked a 3-man crew, and we just took our time to build a spacecraft that would handle that kind of human traffic. And this is how the lander was hooked to the place where they lived on the way out and on the way back. So we had a lunar module, we had a command module, and then we had a service module, which is the gas tank for all the fuel that we needed. And they said, how'd you like to sit like that for 3 days? You begin to smell a little bit, no air. And 3 days back, I mean, we just got there. Now we get to move over, now we come back. So we got to know each other pretty well, according to some of those commanders. So Neil was the first one to reach the commandership thingy, and he would be the first one to step on the moon. And the LEM pilot would stay aloft in moon orbit and crawl forward and fly the LEM, and this is how you lived. There's how the 3 of you lived for 3 days out, and how you lived for 3 days back. So if anybody got sick or ill or whatever, you had to fix it right then and there. And in the lower equipment bay was where the stuff I worked on was a space sextant and a computer marking stars and measuring where they were going, how they were navigating. Seats folded up, and we had plenty to do with navigation. And but there was no real rule. And their most often complaint was how other humans smelled. Especially in a vacuum. You don't realize how bad that is. And then when you get used to it, you get back and you wonder what everybody else smells funny for, you know. So this stuff would float around in free space. There's nothing out there but empty space. We weren't worried about meteorites. We weren't worried about debris. We weren't worried about stars. At this time in the history of our solar system, our system is just nothing there. You go up 10, 20 miles, there is really, I guarantee you, nothing there. It's so vast and so big, and everything is long and clean out and long. So it's kind of like, good we came along this late. Let's see what happened here. Well, Yuri Gagarin made the first record flight around the Earth, in Earth orbit, first to orbit the Earth. And his spacecraft looked like that, re-entry capsule, and it had an airlock. And I got volumes on how he couldn't get in or out of the spacecraft. We don't know why they put that tube on the door so that the man would crawl out during the chamber to get out and slam the door while still in this tube. And he get out there and he's slowly swelling up. He can't get back in. So the guy inside has to pull him out, but he's not supposed to open up that tube unless he's inside that tube. And they were, I don't understand much Russian, but they were upset trying to get this all sorted out. And they used vacuum tubes, we used transistors at the time. And this is what they landed. And they were the first ones to enter space. sent a woman up there too. They were in a hurry to do that. I don't know why. Martin will have to explain it to you. Okay, so we're trudging along here, and this is the difference. On your right is the lander we used to land on the moon and take off of the moon, and everything those two did, command module on the left and the lander on the right, were done on the moon. And the Russians had the same kind of thing. They would toss away stuff they didn't need right away to lighten up the configuration so they could get back. And they threw all that away. So, my friends, if you're up there, you have a lot of souvenirs you can kind of saw up and make a good fortune on, because they're laying all over the place. We got 6 of these suckers up there waiting, door open, help yourself. Good gyros, man. You want a gyro? Go to the moon, pick one up. It's all yours. And let's see what else is going on here. We didn't get everything off the pad, jurisprudence order, and we got one. This is the Russian comment on our efforts that kind of flopped. And a whole lot of flop neck. The American press gets you all over them. They are merciless. And so we had Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, and we learned step by step in Earth orbit and Moon orbit what to do, and we never lost a crewman in the flight to the moon or back. What is so tragic is they never lost an Air Force or a flyer in a pad, a ground pad fire, and we did on Apollo. We lost, set the spacecraft on fire while it was on the pad. And usually that's such a safe environment, everybody gets a little bit lethargic about it, and we lost 3 people on the pad. Never in space have we lost anybody. The Russians, we don't know. One of the things, ladies, they quickly sent women up there anytime they wanted to go. There was a seat. So, but we never been able to figure out all of their shenanigans. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so their spacecraft looked like that, and they were flying all over the place up there, and we came along later, and we did some overall work and claimed to be good with the moon, which it was. And here are the original 7 astronauts, Air Force personnel, fresh from Korea, ready for the NASA aerospace. And Shepard was on the far right there, one of my flags. And Jack was interested in getting ahead of the Russians, because Khrushchev was calling him every day, asking how he was doing, And they really rubbed our nose in it. We were dumping everything in the ocean, recovering everything from the ocean, so obviously we had to lose 1 or 2 spacecraft. We never lost a crewman to this landing method. Came close, but never lost a crewman. This is rendezvous now. You gotta learn to berth these spacecraft, changing orbital parameters, altitude and velocity, in very subtle fashion, so that the 2 nose cones would kind of touch each other, and then you jam the throttle forward and just force them together, and they would clamp. So the biggest trick in Earth orbit was to learn to rendezvous. Okay. And we had guidance problems we worked out, or if we were in front of somebody got in here. Okay. We flew in formation, but that's a farce. You don't have to do anything. You just take your hands off the stick. If you got everything set up initially, they'll stay together. They attract each other in a sense. And so, whooping and hollering. Always landed in the ocean, because the ocean belongs to the world, and anybody could see it if they wanted to. they might get plowed over by one of our battleships, but they could go see the landings. The Russians landed everything in the Ukraine, where there's nobody around, and there's all kinds of stories about some farmers out there raking his yawn, and all of a sudden, bang, in comes the parachute-laden body, and the Russians are always some rush. We were looking for farmland for you. Sure you were. And so this is the moon program. We had transportation, we had to land, we had to take off, get back into orbit. So there's 6 of those bottom stages on Earth. The top stage, we would release into moon orbit, and they crash somewhere on the lunar surface, either before or behind. And so you might think, as I did at the time, do we have a right to lay that much junk around up there? And everybody I talked to, who paid myself, said, yeah, it's okay. So isn't anybody going to sweep up? You. They said, Nueville, you go to sweep up. We're going to put you in for the sweep up. And I said, no thanks. So, yes, it does take some defacing. That's like, the moon is like a monument of the history of the inertial space thing. And here and there, we've got spacecraft that landed, spacecraft that took off and then crashed after they were done using them to rendezvous and get the crews sorted out. And nobody ever talks about it. They told me to shut up a few times. But it's there. And it's your heritage as well as mine. Although I'm not blaming you. So we just didn't have the wherewithal. And of course, 3 of America's corporations made 1 stage each and stacked them all. It showed how well we can work together in this country. And they worked. We never had any of them blow up on the pad. And the Capcom, the command module and the lander were stored above. They're hooked together up to the moon. And that was a 3-day trip to the moon in that configuration with the crew only in the nose cone. Life support's behind them, and the lander is just a vacuum of space, waiting for them to activate it after they got into orbit. Then they get it all fired up, send 2 guys in. We climb in that thing and well, so all of this junk went there. And Werner von Braun was the guy that ran NASA because he ran the missile stuff for Germany in the war. Okay, we called him Dr. Space. He was the one that got the Saturn V, and he did. You don't see any Saturn V blowing up. And this is what he did look like in World War II. In August of '45, Truman went over there and said, hey, you come work for us? He said yes, and so did 800 other scientists, some of whom are shown there. They all went south. They all started rocket building for our country, and that's how we got this thing, the Saturn V. Now that's a lot of heat and fuel and flame coming out of 6 places in the bottom of the tank, and it worked. I still don't know to this day. I wonder if I can get that going. No? Okay. And this is the payload. And you can see how tall the spacecraft is compared to the crew. The bottom half in gold will stay right there as the landing platform, and the top half will launch and then be ejected back into the atmosphere. This is the Russians. So we do things with 6 big engines. They do it with 66 little engines. And this is their Saturn V. Russians have 1. And they recently got out of the space race because this blew up on the pad. There was 15 or 20 people with them, and that was the end of their space program. And then they were, of course, no more interested. Why are you going to the moon? We've been asked. This is the fire in Russia at the site of the launch pad. You will see this in Florida now. You can sit in this building right there. You're watching 2 Saturn V out to the end for a launch, etc. And let's see what else we got here. Houston, Texas, Capcom. And it was, actually, anybody remember who Lady Bird was? Yeah. Lady Bird is what got us, she was the chairman of the board or something at that university, and they had 1,000 acres sitting around, and she volunteered it for me. So this is where the Space Center went out. Now the Space Center, if you go back there, there's no room for anything, right? All buildings, 4 stories, 5 stories high. It's like a city, and all that nice farmland. It'll go on. Well, this is, we don't need windows in the command room, because we're not watching it out the window. And so this is where we all sit during the mission. This is during those days, when you see by the age of the cars, that the building without the windows was where Capcom was for the entire mission. Let's see, these guys are paying $8,000 a year, top dollar. This was the Capcom. The front row is command modules or command cases that are in touch with various aspects of the system, being radio, telegraph, down, so we can tell how everything is working on board. And there was boosters, Saturn, retro was aboard, flight dynamics officer, and guidance was me, and 100 other guys, and lander and 11 computers. We were responsible for all that stuff working together and being right. And we were also in charge of guidance and navigation. So, they're in the process of redoing this for historical reasons to show off the effort made by us during the mission. And so we didn't see that when we were there. I promised we'd all go back, and that's probably a lie. But anyway, we are going to go back there someday. This is a Saturn V, and you can be proud of the fact that we built those puppies, and they did not blow up. The fire on the pad was due to some technician having set down a torch on a launch pad during ballistic testing, but we never lost anybody in flight once we got to the launch pad. This was the assembly pad that we had. So, okay, 3,000 tons, 750 tons, and 200 tons. How would you like to launch that in 3? You couldn't launch one of those safely back when we started. Now we got 3 of them that are dependent upon each other, and they all work every time. And the top of that cone up there, that's where the crew is, okay? And I often gave a lot of courage. I know they never schedule a golf day around lunch, and I think this is enough. So
it's up to you, Harlan, but we want to save a little time for Q&A.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Yeah. No questions asked. Okay. Yes.
What is the load carrying structure inside of the stages so that the thing doesn't collapse on itself? Because
Nothing. The pressure of the fuel is under pressure, and as the fuel goes out, it kind of just gets weaker and weaker. But by the time it gets empty, by the time it gets unloaded, it's empty and there's no stress.
So in Earth's gravity, and when it's on the launch pad,
Yeah.
3,000 pounds or 3,000 tons of fuel approximately. I imagine that the weight of the rocket itself is practically zero compared to the weight of the fuel.
Right.
So it's like an inflated balloon then.
Right, and there's no structures inside. You look in the tank, you wonder that too. What's holding everything together? And everybody says, I don't know. And I'm a guidance engineer, so I can't tell you what the answer is.
Yeah, liquefied oxygen.
Yeah, but they don't even pressurize it. They pressurize
It's under pressure because it's
Yeah, 2 psi is things to max go at times. And those puppies just, I don't dare ask because I don't want to jinx them. But every Saturn V on the pad out there has launched its vehicle. And all I say is, America did that.
So, what was your role during the launch and return?
Okay, I was in mission control for every aspect of the mission. And I was in charge of 8 guys that had better be right every time they gave you an answer. And we had 4 consoles, 2 on the lander and 2 in the command module to care for. And they were in the front there, see. So it was a question of, you better be right, Nueville. Oh, I'm just guessing, you know. Feel free to launch on that comment. So we did work pretty hefty week, you know, for about 6 years there. I was telling my daughter, this is kind of a private joke, but we used to count people who went to mass on Sunday as traitors. And we'd call them that on the way out. Otherwise, we were there 12 hours a day. Something like that.
So why did you launch from Florida and control over it in Texas?
Florida is on the right side of America, so we're going that way with Earth rate.
Okay.
So the Earth is spinning. And we're on the equator because that's the fastest piece that goes. Earth rate. A North Pole just standing there twisting. And we were dumping stuff out over the ocean so we wouldn't be sued if we smacked somebody. So it was very practical to launch vehicles from Florida. Plus, Florida still gave us the cheapest land price, you know, buying the whole beach, everybody off. Here we go. But that was a good question. And we were lucky. Okay. I never questioned that, because you know you do 7, 8, or 9 missions of that stuff, and they're talking about thousands of gallons of volatile stuff that you just look at it and it blows, and we're putting it on top of each other and lighting them off in sequence, you know. So I'm electrical, so I hide behind that. I don't know, but we made it. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Now, you needed 18,500 mile per hour for orbital velocity, as I remember.
Right.
And you needed, what, a little over 24,000 to escape.
Right, we get out to there, and we turn the missile on its moon path, touch off a rocket that gives us 24,000 miles an hour.
Now,
Then we shut it off.
okay, so once you, okay,
And you just coast.
how did you know you were at 24,000? That's when you escaped?
Well, we had radar watching it, we knew the velocity of the vehicle, we knew its position in the ephemeral space, we had computers by the ton calculating and projecting its path. And if we did make a mistake, we just call for a touch correction. So we burp it on the way out a few times. But you had to hit that moon. The moon's going this way, and you had to get in front of it just high enough to be above it when it passed your trajectory. And it worked every time. And I really don't know how the hell we did it. but we did it, you know. Yes.
What is the one thing you don't want to hear at your job?
Abort. Yeah. Never heard of it. No. You did a very good audience, very attentive. You should get all A's.
Any other questions for Harlan?
I was going to ask a question.
Go ahead.
You were saying that once they were actually out on the moon
Yeah.
with a vehicle,
Yeah.
and you said they would only travel as far out as they could walk back.
Right.
Well,
That's that age.
there isn't like
Well, why the
gravity,
vehicle?
or it's a shaky gravity. You were saying something like it's.
Well, you would ask why send them on a vehicle if you're going no further than they're going to walk. Well, we're going to go no further than they're going to walk in case they had to. And we went out 3 times instead of 2 when we had a vehicle. So we go this way, we go that way, we go this way. And with a vehicle, we could do 3 of them, maybe even 4. Without the vehicle, we were lucky to do 2 because they couldn't get back on foot fast enough.
So do you know how far they actually did travel? out
Yeah.
furthest?
About 1/8 of a mile, 1.5 miles sometimes. It depends what we used to call the crazy geologist. Well, I can see that rock. Fine, we'll see a rock. And that sort of thing, but it was very